Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I'm trying to switch to my headphones.
Okay, so I think we're good to go ahead and get started at this point. If others come in, we'll go ahead and add them as well. Um, but yeah, had been looking forward to consensus, particularly this year for a while. We attended ETH Denver a few months prior. Only the entire team didn't go. Just a few of us went, and that was pretty interesting. But consensus tends to be a much bigger event. There was a lot of Web 2 at Consensus this year, in my understanding. I guess what you might call Web 2.5 is really starting to become a thing now, where Web 2 enterprises are looking at integrating and, kind of bringing themselves up to Web 3. And that's actually becoming viable now, whereas before, prior to offloading computation with rollups, that really wasn't even a possibility. But now that there are scaling solutions for programmable assets, it's becoming more of a reality now. So that has huge implications. Hopefully the guys will talk about some of the interactions that they've had at Consensus. I would also like to get like a general sense of sort of the sentiment at Consensus. What were the sort of trends that were very present there? How was everyone feeling generally about the market or different market segments? If any of you would like to jump in, feel free.
Maybe Patrick or uh, then you guys can give you guys thoughts and what you guys saw and how you guys perceive it. Nathan's here as well, so just could jump in and describe your experiences first. We can get into kind of like the specifics of different things we're doing.
Um, so I've been doing this about 18 months now, and you know, um, my big perspective on this event was, when I first started, I was a really big fan of the conferences, but at the end of the day, the big drivers in this industry are relationships you build with other people. And so this time, the event for me was less about the conference and it was more about connecting with people. Like it was kind of surreal because this is kind of like the first time it's happened to me, but I've been doing this for like 18 months. And when I was at this event, I felt like I was constantly running into people that I had met before. And these relationships you build with these guys are important because people know people and they make introductions. And really like on my side on BD, I think a lot of the work that gets done is really just based upon on how much you guys like each other. And so I had a fantastic time. I thought it was really cool. I got to watch a couple panels. I noticed at this event, last year felt more corporate. There were a lot of Web 2 companies coming in with booths and stuff like that, providing ancillary services that you might not consider blockchain native. This time it felt more like crypto native. There was a super cool first person shooter there that was blockchain. The industry had a whole segment dedicated to compliance type stuff, and we've been talking about that Jag's been talking about that for a long time, and this is my first time really noticing that at a conference. So again, we're kind of ahead of the curve on that. It was a good time. And pretty productive. Met a lot of cool contacts that hopefully really yield measurable ecosystem advancements. And that's all I got to say.
Yeah, nice. What about you, Dylan? What were your takeaways? Or Matthew?
I really enjoyed the conference for a lot of reasons, a lot of things that Nathan touched on, but also the fact that most of us work remotely for the good part of the year, and so the conferences also provide a great opportunity for the entire team to get together and get to know each other better personally. And it's kind of amazing that we're all working towards the same objective, because we have a lot of overlapping ideas, and even things that we disagree on, we're able to discuss them with each other and be civil. And I don't know, we've got a great group of people, and basically firing on all cylinders, because there could be something to do with Syscoin and blockchain and our underlying ideals and the things that we're working towards, but it could also be things that aren't usually part of polite conversation. Like, we can talk about religion and politics, and even if we're coming from different sides, we all understand each other, and it's something that's really special. In today's world, there's not enough of that, especially just talking to a general audience. So the fact that we're all able to do that and I guess vibe with each other, it says a lot more about the different harmonies that we have within our spread across our team.
Yeah, I would agree. The team is very strong, and at the end, Jag gave this kind of like really nice end of event speech. You know, this token project it has been around for a long time, and it's come a very far way, and it's now getting into a phase of growth that is going to be totally different than anything that's happened before. And you know, we have this core team assembled, and we have, I don't know, you know, it's weird. It's like a blockchain startup, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and a lot of these things are firing really well. And there's so much that could potentially happen for us in the next 12 months. It's really cool.
Yeah, that was basically just reiterating that not many blockchain projects have the teams that have been around, and their community facing teams. You know, prior to BCF, there was a lot of pollination of corporate versus community, and now it's fully community driven. Like, the people in the foundation and in Sys Labs are all pretty much from the community, right? Or someone vouched from them from the community. So it's very organic, and that you don't see that, you know, even in tech startups, you have to hire your quote unquote execs to do the front client facing things and relations and stuff, and we don't. You know, we're believers of kind of a new way of almost envisioning finance, right? It's the way that people are going to be making money, the way that people are going to be growing products, the way that people will be thinking about even revenue models are going to be all completely different. And so from the ground up, you need a recipe of collectives of people that are very different in mindset to get together and be part of that. Not the typical, let's just have a company with the same sort of cookie cutter, you know, just cut it out and make another company and start it up and has a typical revenue model and IPO strategy and this and that. Is I think that's a dying model, and we'll see that quickly happening here, especially with AI and blockchain pushing so fast that the revenue models, and it'll be seen on the stock markets, the revenue models of those systems will be outcompeted by these ones. So why don't we touch on maybe an update on Rolex and what's happening there, and then a few of the other interesting things we got going on. We did an announcement there of Rolex, the brand, which was perceived well. It was interesting that a lot of a lot of money market people started to come in thinking that, oh, new product, I can come in and invest in something. And then we knew these people and realized that they didn't even know there was an attachment to Syscoin. So we did sort of a test where we just launched the Rolex brand. We didn't tie it to Sys, and we launched the ecosystem party at Sky Lounge in Austin. It was a great venue. That turned out really well. It was probably the highlight of all of Consensus, and everyone would kind of say that was like the best party. And it was kind of condensed, like 200 to 300 people. It was oversubscribed, and many of the people came in there, and they didn't even know that it was affiliated to Sys, because most people have heard of Sys. And it was funny seeing that. And so there's definitely appetite for people to come in and invest in new things. We were playing around with these concepts, and we're also with the new ideas we have related to the super apps, which we can get into. We were asking for feedback from the market, and we got really good feedback on directions that those things are going. Now that we're ending the infrastructure phase where we have scalable infrastructure with security in mind, and then we have to start thinking about what are the few 3 or 4 to 5 things that should be being done on top that the business layer or the people coming in that will be building their token projects will need, or the mom and pops that need to interface with this technology, what they will need. So those 4 or 5 things, we've bounced ideas off of some smart people, and we've got really good feedback that we are thinking about this the right way, and not just coming up with ideas that won't get traction. So before we get into that, maybe we can get some perspective from some others if you guys want. Otherwise, we can kind of get into those aspects of Rolex, what stage it's in, and then some of the products we're doing, what stage they're in. Overall, broad vision of this year headed towards the end, and something like later half of events like Token 2049, and I think ETH Soul, some of these bigger ones that are happening at the end of the year, which we're planning for as well.
Yeah, excellent. So if anyone has any additional perspective that they'd like to add, like about the Rolex party, or really anything, go ahead and jump in now before we start getting into some of the different product updates and whatnot.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. No, I think the conference went great. Something that I noticed about, the Syscoin project or our project in comparison to other projects I see going to conferences is that, every single one of the conferences that we go to, we come back and we grow. We end up with, over a dozen new integrations, partnerships. And this conference was no difference. We met a lot of new people, especially from the marketing as far as outreach goes. We'll have a lot better outreach coming up soon. A lot more people to work with. Overall, I think the conference went great.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't I've invited one more person, David Cray, who's joined. I've been personally talking to him. He was advising us at Blockchain Foundry as sort of like a business product advisor, product manager, as we were thinking about products. And then me and him, we became friends, and I brought him into Sys Labs, and he's doing good. He's kind of like the American, typical American, salt and pepper, a little bit older. He's he's from New Orleans, and he's got really good business connections, and he's able to put 2 and 2 together, and he's got that crypto experience from the business sense. So we pulled him in. He's pretty much the front face of any investor relations or productization sort of aspects going forward. So you guys will get to meet him and see what he's about, but he's a really good guy. And if he comes in, we'll let him get a chance to speak about a few of the products that we got going on, and what the feedback he's getting is, and potential people to work with there. But Rolex, so let's think about Rolex. So we were going to launch at this event, at our launch party, but we realized that our Pegasus, which is the main DEX, is based on Uniswap V2, and we have 20 to 30 DeFi projects that are waiting to launch, and they all depend on liquidity and AMM and DEX. A lot of them were requesting now that Uniswap V3 is open source. It was a restrictive license prior to April this year. So starting in April, we realized that we should be working with Uniswap V3, and that's kind of the new model. It has a lot of efficiency gains. So it takes time to base Pegasus from a new base, and then the UX and all that on top. So we decided that instead of releasing and then migrating everyone over, which is as a pain and could be complex, to start with a Uniswap V3 base and build Pegasus on top of that. So we're going ahead with that, and that's pretty much halfway done now. And then the 20 to 30 whatever projects are waiting in DeFi will be much easier for them to integrate. And going forward, new projects will be easy to plug them in because the AMM is standard, and stuff like DAO-sys is depending on standardness as well. So there's the change one, we introduced that relationship, which is kind of the canonical bridge to go across chains. Personally, DJ, the CEO of Change, is going to commit 10 million into TVL to allow people to bridge in and out. As you know, it's an optimistic based roll up, and so the biggest fallback or trade off from ZK based optimistic to optimistic is the exit period time of 7 days, right? So typically, if you're trying to get in, it's fine. When you're trying to leave, it takes a long time. And in order to avoid that, people have third-party bridges, and those third-party bridges require liquidity. And so this is where having a partner to kickstart that is important, because people can get in and out and not have to wait 7 days. And now the trade-off between ZK and optimistic, going to optimistic, is negligible. In fact, you don't have the overhead of the ZK proving, which is slow, and you're limited to maybe 10, 15 transactions a second max. Like ZK Sync and Starkware, they're not doing more than 20 to 30 TPS at any given time. So because of that high overhead, and for us, since we've removed the bottleneck of data availability on the main blockchain, and we've put it back to the CPU, the bottleneck, and so theoretically we're able to push Visa MasterCard levels of scale to today as soon as Rolex is launched, and we won't have the overhead of ZK. So I almost consider there's a 1 to 2 year gap between ZK catching up on the scale side for base, like base EVMs on layer 2, and then further a 3 to 5 year gap for other the next sort of iteration of layer 3s, what we call DApp chains. And this is going to what Polygon's talking about, what ZK Sync era is all about, what Starkware is doing, what Arbitrum is doing with custom app chains. However, our take is a little bit different. Those guys are all thinking about EVM based layer 3s, and we're thinking about custom execution environments where Solidity is not it's not going to be the place where you're going to be creating performant applications. It's more for trusted, secure, decentralized base layers where you have many interoperable ecosystems building on top. But if you have, for example, a TradFi or a casino, and you want to just run that very fast and efficiently, and the trading engine needs to support millions of orders a second like Binance does, then you can't build that in an EVM. There is no hope for you to do that on Arbitrum or Polygon or anything. It just won't scale. And so there's a 3 to 5 year gap as the ZK tech matures enough where it actually starts to outcompete on the performance. And I'm not even convinced maybe it could even get there within 3 to 5 years. So the optimistic assumptions are still valid, and so that's not going to die off. But the bases, the layer 2s that we base off, like what Rolex would be, ideally it does become ZK, but it still needs more than 10 to 15 TPS in order for it to be a success story. So for now, the Bedrock integration is probably the most enterprise production ready code for any rollup out there. And because we have the data availability, we'll be the first to market any sort of rollup with layer 1 data availability. We get the Bitcoin security and we get Visa and MasterCard level of scale until we can replace that with ZK at the same level of scale. And then move the optimistic stuff up to layer 3, which is some of the really cool things we're thinking about. So the rollup.
You've said a lot of great stuff, Jag, but I just want to offer people maybe a boil down of a couple of things that you mentioned. So when you were talking about custom execution environments, basically what you're saying, right, is that the idea is for applications that exist today, in their current native runtime, would be able to, continue to run like they are, but essentially have provable state, right, anchored to blockchain, right? So we wouldn't be limited by the performance bottlenecks of, say, EVM or Solidity, but we would have the benefits of provable state, and that's actually a pretty huge. That's what opens the door for, like, for example, like a Binance type DEX. And a lot of other things as well.
So just like we had the intuition that blockchain is a court system, not a transaction processor, and the block size debate was the way Bitcoin played out was correct, that bigger blocks are not better for Bitcoin. Just like how we realized that Lightning Networks is not something that is going to help Bitcoin become money, because there's not enough bandwidth on Bitcoin to support that. So if it had started with a little bit bigger blocks, it would have been fine. But that was a different case for what Bitcoin Cash was talking about, just throw everything on the blockchain. And then just like we realized that ZK is going to come and create economies of scale, and the EVM is important for standardization. Bitcoin is standardized for security. EVM, Ethereum was standard for flexibility or smart contracts. And then just like the realization we had that the data availability is a core component to all this, in order to scale up in a modular blockchain, when you have separate layers, you have to have the data availability component built into the blockchain, which we did now in the last release to mainnet. This is our next realization, that in order for us to actually get real world utility usage, you need to tap into native code and not rewrite the world's software stack in some new nascent language that is not focused on those things. It's focused on totally something different. So yeah, that's where we realized that the businesses, enterprises, and existing games, and even something like AI, given an interesting talk about aligning AI, and we offered a technical solution to the problem by putting a custom execution environment, aka layer 3, running the AI, LLM. And since we know it's deterministic, then we can know that it's not recreating itself and spinning off and plotting to kill everybody. So the AI alignment problem actually potentially is a way to be solved in this way as well. So when you talk about custom execution environments, that's like a big open-ended problem, and there's a few partners we're looking at to help solve that. But our vision there is quite different than what all the other layer 2s are thinking about. So this is our unique take, and maybe the benefits of our visions coming from the beginning and applying here will be our edge or separation.
Yeah, it seems like the other guys are focused on like more and more layers of EVM, right? Just EVM on top of EVM.
They're just cookie cutting.
Yeah.
They're cookie cutting. They have a base and they're just going to copy that and put it as like a tree structure and just keep rinse and repeating. And I think that's not the right. I think the tree is interesting to scale, but cookie cutting is not going to get you there.
Yeah. Hey, there's one point I wanted to make, because you mentioned change, and you mentioned a bridge provider essentially offering like a liquidity type bridge, I think, for exiting Rolex back to the Syscoin layer 1. So, to get rid of that 7-day delay or what have you, basically them taking on the risk of the fraud proofs, right? So one point that I want to make is with a lot of use cases that will use the rollup, especially as everyone in the blockchain space kind of envisions mass adoption. A lot of those use cases like games, and many other things, I'm sure things that we haven't even thought of yet, a lot of those users will not really have that concern. They're not even going to think about exiting to the layer 1, right? So it's important to know that so that you realize that the 7-day delay part that's kind of inherent to the optimistic architecture is not going to be really a big deal for a lot of people, but it is kind of a big deal for certain use cases that currently right now are very important in blockchain and will continue to be, things like DeFi. So users will want to go back to the layer 1 for a variety of reasons from time to time. So it's good that we have that. But yeah, I just wanted to help everyone see bigger picture that a lot of users will never even think about exiting or be aware that that's a thing, right? Or even know that they're using blockchain. But nevertheless, it's the security has to be there. There has to be the capability for them to exit to layer 1, whether they use it or not, because that is the same sort of infrastructure that is securing the rollup, and their assets need to be secure whether they understand how they work or not.
Yeah. So David's in here. If you want to pull up David Cray, he can be a speaker as well. Maybe we can start to talk about a few of the other things on top of Rolex. We're thinking about, like at Syslabs, there's a GameFi component, and again that plays into the custom execution environments. And again, everything we're doing is going to be very unique and different. Like the GameFi today, people are just running games and then they're just accepting tokens as an IOU, but those tokens are likely sitting in a middleware, or you have to totally trust the game is processing the tokens properly. And in order to solve that, you need to create games in a deterministic way. Almost like the game server should be running as a custom execution environment on chain. And so all of the synchronization around tokens and NFTs that get used in the games, or you can extrapolate that to casinos, games, exchanges, anything that needs to run in a probabilistic way that accepts digital assets. That is something that we're really interested in. We'll start with GameFi. So with the partner that will help us solve the custom execution environments at scale, we'll look to do that with GameFi and do like a little DAO there. The second one is the compliance and regulation. So regulation is coming by 2025. I think most of the wallets will end up having to have travel rule compliance built in. So users will have to KYC into some service, and all of the insufficiently decentralized projects, even the front ends like Uniswap and some of these front ends, will end up having to have this check. You can run a full node if you want and try to bypass that, but likely no one's going to be able to really run a full node on Ethereum to do such a thing. So all the travel compliance will have to be figured out. And there's a few partners we're looking at to integrate in our tech stack, so we're ready for that and we don't be disrupted. And then compliance is a totally different thing. That's how can we issue real world assets, or there's like a $40 trillion market for real world assets to come into the blockchain, right? And a lot of the big players are thinking about how to do that. Well, we've been in the space for so long. We have some pretty cool thoughts there. And we've boiled that down to the issuance aspect of bringing the real world assets into a platform and having the right sort of checks done. So all the base layer of that is probably a DID. And Polygon's working on ZK-DID. And we're thinking about ZK-DID. But an identity layer that is flexible enough to do just basic KYC, but also do more checks as needed for the project. And it shouldn't affect the base layer from operations perspective. Like, you're not coding this into Syscoin or Ethereum, but these are the applications, the distributed apps that need to be aware that potentially would be consuming some sort of digital identity attestations in the smart contracts. So that's some of the compliance stuff, and likely we'll be working with regulators there. So, as we get deeper into the thought leadership, into helping regulators also creating products for real world assets, look for those announcements from Syslabs. And then the other thing I want to touch on is it's really, this is like, from the nerd in me, I love to talk about this, is the super app. And as you know, like most of the important apps in the world will likely coming up will be super apps. I think Twitter, Telegram, Signal, all these ones will be disrupted. And I think what Elon is doing with X is a potential challenger. I think WeChat is a potential challenger if they get the AI right. But most of the ones that are not focused on AI today will be disrupted pretty quickly, because the AI is going to enable the digital world to become high fidelity, almost as in you won't be able to tell. It's going to be so native to you that it's going to be hard to tell that you're actually in the digital world versus the physical.
It's a total game changer. I mean, essentially what we're doing with SuperDAP, we have some features that that are very useful that people can understand today. Things like chat and group chat, a crypto wallet, but the AI aspect really is kind of the gateway to the future. As far as how the user experience is going to evolve in line with the capabilities that AI is really introducing. That's a big point of creativity, and we're going to have to see how that evolves and participate in that, because the user experience as we think of it today will probably be completely different once people and designers start to really grasp the implications of AI and begin to harness that. So essentially with SuperDAP, we've got an application that provides AI, the eyes and the ears, and the text interface, between it and you as a user. It's going to be very interesting to see how SuperDAP evolves, or really what kind of SuperDAPs, plural, will use what we currently call the SuperDAP platform. So yeah, there's some interesting directions that this will go, and it looks like David has joined us as well. So David, can you hear us?
I can. I'm having some audio problems on the listening side, but I've got a separate speaker, but I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So feel free to jump in and offer your perspective. Any comments on Consensus specifically, what you saw there, any changes in the industry that you noticed at Consensus, and I think everybody would love to hear your perspective on the different products that are being built on Syscoin, from Syslabs as well.
I'd be glad to. I think that in general, I'll start off with Consensus. Consensus, I believe that. Let me say this. I think for the Consensus, and then also in the prior conferences, some of the conferences that we've gone to that have been more blockchain oriented and more beyond just the scope of crypto, has been looking at things like externally moving to more of a compliant trading platform, compliant engagement, compliant jurisdictions. So regulations obviously are having a huge impact on that. There's also an evolution into more use case of focus to see where, rather than just trading, where you start to move into specific use cases around crypto, around DAO, around the wallets, around just a complete decentralization Web3 framework. So I think there's a big component of that that's evolving globally. And that's been, from investors, from users, from stakeholders, from Singapore all the way to Eastern Europe. It's been ubiquitous everywhere. The other thing that I think started to evolve at Consensus was that theme as well. But then also, because Consensus is a little bit more dev focused, a little bit sometimes internal focused, and also with the stakeholder focused, I think you're beginning to see a movement to where they're looking at blockchain companies and decentralized DeFi companies that have been largely foundation run, decentralized, like we are, but move to more of a traditional IT stack or a traditional IT operating environment where you have privacy, security protocols in place. You have some of these other elements. So as you move into these different use cases, you have the internal infrastructure and then the market engagement to really have, the ability to support your community, not just in producing product that would then just be traded, but have something that would be specific to a use case and have that support structure around that. So that's something else that there were several panels at, there was a protocol stage at Consensus that seemed to be the theme of that stage, really talking about how to bring maturity, if you will, to some of the DeFi projects that have been out there. And obviously with our legacy and pedigree, we already have a lot of that in place. So it gives us a leg up in that space. And then lastly, when it comes to the different products, I think what's kind of fallen into a couple of different areas. There is looking at the trading related products that we have, Poly Wallet, Pegasus 0 and 1, Kamada, those sort of move into this whole compliant, regulated market framework, global trading platform. This week I'm in San Francisco at Digital Assets Week, which is more TradFi moving into digital assets. That's tokenization, not just crypto, but tokenization of other assets and compliant protocols and a lot of the functionality of market function as it exists today. Where does it move to a Web 2.5 model where you begin to introduce tokenization, decentralization into traditional finance and traditional financial services and trading? And then where do you go to what might be the next realm? There's obviously a lot of people in TradFi that don't want that to happen. They want to keep things centralized, but that will be sort of that philosophical or ethos-oriented conversation that will evolve over the next several years. That's been a big part of it. The other part of our stack in our portfolio that I think has evolved is when we move into something like Luxy, as to where does Luxy and the NFT platform fit in a whole mix. I think we all know that there's a lot of use cases for NFTs for music rights management, royalty distribution with a smart contract attached to an NFT, badging, credentialing in everything from healthcare to hospitality and events. There's a lot of applications in that space. And then lastly, I think we get to, then I should mention DAOsys. The DAO concept, I think, is being discussed more. That's also being discussed by TradFi people. And I think to see as whether we go GameFi or some of the applications, the DAO concept, I think, is something that's going to be move forward and be prevalent. Japan has introduced legislation to legalize DAOs as a corporate entity. So I think many entities are beginning to realize that when you decentralize, centralized corporate control is not going to work. Centralized treasury management is not going to work. So you'll have somebody used the phrase yesterday, permission DAO. And I think we've seen permissionless DAOs, but DAOs have also had a lot of rug pulls and other not good things with them. But I think you'll move into some of the areas where there'll be permission DAOs, so to speak, like a permission blockchain, where you'll have specific entities that will create a DAO in order to have that decentralized governance and decentralized treasury management. So the DAOsys platform, I think, is going to be something that will move to the forefront. And lastly, obviously SuperDApp and what we're doing with SuperDApp, from everything from the secure messaging, the AI, the Travala partnership, all of that, I think, is getting a lot of buzz. And lastly, I'll close on this point. I can tell you from being at all these conferences and everyone using Telegram to interact with and network with, quite often, I've thought to myself, I wish we had SuperDApp ready to go right now, because it would be a great tool for us to be using at the conferences to really enhance on we're in Discord right now, or when you think about what Telegram does, or all the ways that people interact today, that it's not about business cards and LinkedIn. That might be a secondary approach, but it's all about the new way of engagement and how the decentralized digital world comes together on a daily basis. And that component is really going to be something that would be a great use case for SuperDApp when we launch. So I think that's my assessment of everything. And it's been a whirlwind of activity, a lot of buzz, a lot of activity. People know about our parties last week, a lot of investor interest, and it's been all around strong. Thanks. I'll close.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I think most people in the Syscoin community might not be familiar with who you are, David. I should have thought of this and said, "Hey, David, introduce yourself." But yeah, if you don't mind, give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're doing with Syslabs.
Sure, glad to. My role with Syslabs is head of investor relations and also chief product officer. So my background is almost 3 decades in product management, and primarily spent a good portion of that in medical technology, in medical devices, medical IT, health information technology, telemedicine, telematics, all the way down to things like stem cells. So a lot of product management in that space, and product management is purely product market fit. How do you design products that fit the market? And that's really the essence of what product management is. And there's a lot of methods and tools and operational infrastructure that's put in place to make sure that is done in an efficient and productive way. So that's sort of my CPO role with the chief product officer role. And then with the head of investor relations, a lot of it is really relaying the Syslabs, Syscoin origin story and where we are today, and then our roadmap to investors, and really, showing them the value proposition on where we are. It's not so much about finance. It's more about the story and where we are as an organization, as a product stack, as the legacy of Syscoin and the foundation and what you all have done prior. And I should mention also my engagement. I've known Jag for several years now. I was a consultant on the product side with Blockchain Foundry and consulted them for a couple of years. And Blockchain Foundry was acquired last year. Obviously, Syslabs created as a for-profit entity to commercialize some of the technology and products that have come out of Syscoin Foundation. And so stepped in a few months ago to step into these different roles. But I've been working with Jag for several years and know Syscoin very well for several years, but I'm new to Syslabs and new to the foundation and Bradley and some of the other team. And it's great. Like I said before, I started in the technology space in 1993 and been in blockchain since 2014. This is one of the best teams I've ever worked with in any industry, Web 2, Web 3, or whatever it is. So very excited about the future for all of us. Thanks.
Yeah, I can certainly attest, and I think others can too, here on the stage, to how you've helped, Syslabs in a big way. One challenge for us was really, given the fact that Syscoin is so powerful and is so general purpose, and is such a critical piece of infrastructure that can support so many different things. It was, sort of seeing the entire picture there, the bird's eye view, and how to properly productize and all of that. You've been instrumental in that in a way that we absolutely needed. So yeah, so kudos and hats off to you for that. Thank you.
I was just saying, I think we covered the basics. We have the compliance. We've got a good foothold in there. We got the layer 2 coming out now, waiting for Pegasus to just do their update. And then we can onboard liquidity. We're doing a dry run on mainnet right now. And then we got the super app, which basically is my take on creating an AI-based operating system. Basically, that's the vision. We're going there. There's the GameFi, which is really interesting as we get into AI with blockchain and GameFi as well. We end up at dynamic simulations and dynamic storyboards. This will be really cool working with game developers as AI flourishes as well. And then we got obviously just the rest of the infrastructure, which is ready. And Luxy and these other products are kind of waiting for the roll up to launch so that the DeFi can start playing a role. So I think we've covered the basics, and if there's questions, maybe we should cover that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to get to that. So, if you guys have any questions, I'm sure there are questions. Feel free to request. There's a way to request to speak, I believe. And there's also the chat. So either way, I'll be watching the chat, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
There was a question from Concourse around the super app. How's it going to compete with the big players? First of all, I don't think it will compete directly. I think WhatsApp and these other big players are going to be disrupted either by us or by someone else. And why I think that is because they came around post. They were pre-AI, and AI came post these products. We happen to be developing at the same time as AI, the inflection AI point with ChatGPT. So we are an AI first super app, right? We've taken the concept of what Fort Knoxtra was doing, and I thought, that's pretty good. It's a nice sort of home base. But then if you add in the AI aspect, it changes the game on what it's going to be. So it's almost like if WhatsApp was to look at this and be like, you know what, like we have to start from the ground up. And I don't think that they're going to start from the ground up. They're just going to add in AI functionality into it and be able to leverage. So in a reactive situation where Telegram and WhatsApp and these guys are adding in AI, it's going to be pretty easy to disrupt that model with something that's going to be astoundingly more useful with AI first person, like kind of like a first class, first citizen type of integration with that. And how that would work, just to give you guys kind of a taste. We haven't flushed this fully out, but the AI is generally pretty. It's not totally. It's not human level intelligence yet, but you can get it to be pretty smart if you give it capabilities to read external sources. So if you guys watch like the Sam Altman's demo where he started to hook in external plugins like Discord, and then they quickly introduced plugin exchange on ChatGPT through OpenAI. Very similarly, imagine you've given it the eyes and ears of your mobile device or your desktop, and you can ask it questions like, set up an appointment and book me a car and send some flowers, or just these integrations are done through plugins, and these are the things that extend the usefulness of the AI and increase the intelligence of it, basically. So for example, you can hook in an email plugin, you can hook in an openbookings.com plugin for restaurant bookings, you can hook in an Uber plugin, you can even create custom plugins and even hook in a custom LLM model behind it as a custom plugin. So these things are available as a developer ecosystem inside of the app that developers can come in and monetize themselves. It's not just an app, it's more of an ecosystem that gets created where developers can monetize. If you think of it from a 1,000-foot view, there are three boxes. There's AI, then there's Web3, and there's a social component to it. Social is just how humans are talking to each other and how humans are interacting with the AI through the senses of your digital device. So you put those three together and you just combine them and you mix and match them. And those are sort of the features you get. So a developer is going to want to have incentives. So that's where Web3 comes in. And a developer wants to be able to create general plugins that will be used and consumed, that will be consumed by social channels. And they will want to be able to do this in a really easy way and plug in to the thing. And so it's consumed in a nice and easy way. So it's not custom integrations every time. That's where AI comes in. So all of those working together creates a unique, a path toward almost like a software-based operating system that enhances itself as developers plug it in. In the long term, I think, you can even prompt the AI to go and say, create a bunch of plugins you think could be useful, and it just starts to recursively do it on its own.
Yeah, like an auto GPT type thing, but probably better because it will be in the future, maybe in the very near. But yeah, we want to rethink UX too, in light of AI, and a lot of these existing, these existing providers like Telegram, even Twitter. I mean, you'll see their user interface is fairly simple. It's a classic sort of design that's been around for a very long time. So they've got existing business models that have existed for quite a while. So they're kind of tethered by all of that as well. So we can move on to the next question. Cristigiano is asking, is there any definite date for Rolex release? To that, I would say probably not. Right? I mean, we don't have an exact date yet. We might shortly. That's a possibility. But there's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of it is pretty much ready. But yeah, Jag, I'll let you continue.
I think the hard part's been done. We've done the mainnet release with POTA. That was the hard part. We've done the Rolex integration on testnet. No reported bugs. That was the hard part. So it's running is mainly just doing a few dry runs internally on mainnet and getting ready for the liquidity and the dexes so that the DeFi products could plug in. So it's more of just finalizing the software stack on the DeFi component of it, and then just a marketing strategy for you guys just to figure out how to enter the market with it. There's going to be a TVL already, as you know, the change guy's going to put in 10 million, but there's going to be 20 to 30 DeFi protocols already ready to go. We expect TVL to kind of jump up, and then we're going to take marketing kind of and push that along so that creates like a hype cycle. And but the difference between us and sort of some of the new ecosystems starting out is we've had the foresight of seeing everything play out from ground zero from before. We also got the different unique product strategies that will help onboard different airdrop campaigns can come out of those. So the viral effects is like a playbook that we're going to play out in different ways. And every major conference you go to will have a different game plan for different sorts of things we can do, because we've got probably 5 or 6 really big things, and we could focus on 1 or 2 per event, and we could just focus on different ones per event and create better viral effects that way instead of focusing on just 1 or 2 things over and over.
Yeah, and I'd like to add as well, and then we can move on to the next question. I'd like to add that, there's a lot of different aspects to this rollout. One of those that me and several others are working on is documentation of Rolex, right? So on the positive side, a lot of the documentation of Optimism Bedrock applies to Rolex, of course, since we are a fork of Optimism, but with some very important differences. It's a matter of outlining those differences, documenting those, and also refactoring the documentation. And that involves a lot more than just, like, say, replacing the word optimism with the word Rolex. It involves, getting the smart contracts in the tutorials established on Rolex and on the L1 and a lot of other things. So we're working through that as well. But that's just one example of another part to this. The Rolex launch will be something that will kind of happen in stages, right? So Rolex will go mainnet, maybe it will be transitioned to mainnet, and then this piece will come up followed by another over the course of time. So the next question, how have developers outside of Syscoin reacted to Rolex and what it promises to offer so far, parentheses partners / dApps that are in line to integrate?
I think it's an easy sell compared to maybe other ecosystems because, again, like you have to start with the standards. Like we view Bitcoin as a standard of security, and we view Ethereum, EVM in Ethereum as a standard for flexibility. And so a lot of new projects will deviate away from that, thinking, "Oh, we need to scale." So EVM isn't going to work for us. But the problem is, most of the developers and tools are EVM based. It's got such a big network effect. And even if it doesn't, I still think EVM is probably the way forward because it's focused on security and decentralization rather than optimization. When we get to the breaking up the layers and doing layer 1, layer 2, and even the custom executions of layer 3s, that's where you should apply your optimizations. And so the developers see this and that's the parameterization and the design and the philosophy behind it makes a lot of sense. It's easy to understand why we made these decisions, because it's easy to understand why Bitcoin is the most secure system and why EVM is the most standard and then why a modular blockchain scales. And so these are just intuitions, we just almost like common sense that you just describe, and then people are like, why didn't anyone think about that before? So from the developer and the partner perspective, I think once you get the snowball rolling, it will self-perpetuate much faster than others. Then you have like the SUI types of blockchains that come out of nowhere and they have huge VC money, and because of that, people want to try and join it. But then, as a developer gets in there, like, you know what, this is a lot harder to do what I wanted. But in our system, everything will be easy to go, and you have the motivation from the ground up, knowing that the design aligns a lot with the philosophies of most of the developers out there.
Nice. So a question for David. What do you think about existing products on Syscoin such as Luxy or Pegasus?
I think that for those two in particular, one with Pegasus, I see Pegasus more and more. I see Pegasus connected to Kamada. So I think that there can actually be an argument made in different applications that Kamada, Pegasus, and Poly could be packaged almost together, or be sort of a solution set. So I think that and more for more holistic development around a project, I could even see where Douses could be part of that, where Douses, Kamada, and Polywallet can come together, because they all are symbiotic and complementary to each other in different facets and different use cases for different applications. So I can see where the part of the portfolio, and I should mention too that we started to refer to it internally and somewhat externally, but I think it's really the best description for SysLabs and all these products is that this is a Web3 portfolio. It's a Web3 solution set, and it's a Web3 ecosystem. And that's really what we're doing. We're addressing the Web3 ecosystem, and we have our solution set delivering Web3 solutions to that ecosystem. That's really where all these things come into play. So when you look at Polygon, Pegasus, and when you look at Pegasus, and you look at the other trading-related tool products that we have, they kind of are complementary to one another. When you look at something like Luxy, though, Luxy also fits in that model, because if you think of the NFT applications, you've got a bunch of people know sort of the OpenSea aspects of investing in NFTs. But really, when you look at the functionality of NFTs, the use case, the utility of NFTs, you have a lot of applications that are things like in intellectual property management, music rights management, where you can have the music rights, the copyright for music, sync rights for film or television, which is music audio also. You could have the songwriter right, the performing rights, the mechanical rights, all those different elements that make up a large percentage of the music label and music technology and music business industry. A lot of that functionality can be replaced really with an NFT. And so that application, if you think of a entertainment finance or a music finance model, you can do things where you can tokenize intellectual property, you can tokenize real world assets, it's a form of securitization of royalty streams. It can be managed with NFTs. So you could actually incorporate Pegasus, the Luxy, Dousus, Poly, and maybe even SuperDAO, all in one solution set, in one application. So these products are symbiotic of one another. I know sometimes people look at the portfolio and say, oh, each one of these has their own roadmap, each one of these has their own go-to-market plan, each one of these has their own use case, but really they're very symbiotic when you begin to look at the applications and the functionality that really Web3 technology has not really realized yet. It's not gone in there yet. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the conversation that came out of World Blockchain Summit and Consensus last week and so on is going to real-world use cases. So our entire stack applies to all these real-world use cases, and they're really just they're tools in the toolkit. And the toolkit is everything under the SysLab umbrella: proprietary development, R&D, JVs, and then also partners that will come and build on us that we'll maybe partner with, JV with, co-market with, or co-develop with in the future. So the ecosystem of Syslabs and the growth path of Syslabs is built around all of these. All this entire stack has a part in our mission. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think that answers it very well. And, I would just say, too, that Luxy and Pegasus, as they exist right now on the layer 1, those are primitives. They're primitives for, automated market maker and, for an NFT marketplace. But obviously, from what David said, you hear that there's much bigger plans and there's a much bigger picture. But, of course, you have to have those functioning in that primitive state first before that. So it will be interesting to see how Pegasus evolves and Luxy as well across the different layers, even off into the DApp chain sort of custom execution environment concept, maybe that Jag had mentioned before as well, and how that will tie in. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to skip anyone that asked a second question for now and move on to a new person. So from Montiel asked, what are the plans to get more users for the ecosystem? I mean, the biggest thing in that regard is to provide some sort of cutting edge service that people need that is utilizing the Syscoin blockchain or other aspects of our ecosystem. I think Super DApp is a perfect example of something that could potentially bring a lot of adoption, and basically having Rolex mainnet. I mean, right now our layer 1, as everyone knows, is focused almost completely on decentralization and security, right? So there's the user experience is a bit lacking there. Naturally, that is a barrier for projects that have end users that expect a very fast experience. But it's absolutely critical in the big picture to have that piece in place and have it done well first. Once Rolex hits mainnet, and there's actually a layer there that's very performant, and applications are running on top of it that provide the kind of user experience or a new kind of user experience that people have never seen before, that's leading edge. That's the way to really grow the Syscoin, user base, projects having a layer that they can launch on that meets or exceeds their expectations, right? So the next question is there an application already utilizing ZDAG on UTXO? There's a project that provides gold and silver backed stablecoins that uses the SPT asset platform on the UTXO chain. And those assets are compatible with ZDAG. And there was a demonstration, I believe, that used ZDAG for those as well. So if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, Jag, go ahead. I think it's the load project, right?
Yeah, that one.
Okay. So ZDAG has a lot of potential if something like Lightning Networks evolves and becomes better than it is today. But in any case, what we're kind of seeing now with the trajectory of blockchain and scaling is that rollups, zero knowledge proofs, and as we said, custom execution environments really probably are the future of scaling. But ZDAG is a useful tech still, particularly for stablecoins and things like that. And it can tie into compliance on the layer 1 as well. Let's see. Will the Poly Wallet V2 support account abstraction technology? Good question.
Yeah, I think it's on the roadmap. We want to support that both on SuperDApp and Poly. It's not going to be V1. It'll come out after that. We have to, I think the account abstraction side needs to be more standardized, but definitely we will support it. We have something called DiFi built into SuperDApp, and leverage account abstraction with that as well. It's sort of like a timed encryption where if you don't ping your wallet, it'll assume that your wallet got stolen or something like that, and your beneficiary can come in and access with KYC access the wallet. So if something happens to you or it gets stolen or whatnot. So that's account abstraction helps out. It's not done with account abstraction right now, but it can help out make things more dynamic within DiFi. And I think there's someone's asking about downtime on Rolex. I mean, I think the goal is for it to be decentralized. I mean, the sequencer is fairly simple. It's just packaging blocks. There's no MEV attacks because we are not going to be performing MEV. So the benefit we get here is on layer 2 there will be no MEV issues, which is really nice. But also because it has a memory pool, it won't be a first come first serve like you see on Arbitrum. It'll be like you package a whole bunch of transactions and every 2 seconds they'll get confirmed, but we won't be doing MEV or anything like that. So you don't have minor extractable value being done on our side. But you do, it is single sequencer, so there is chance of it going down. We do have multiple systems that are watchdogs that we've coded up over the last few months to watch for this. Not only watch for the settlements on layer 1 for the state to keep processing, but also watch for the sequencer to go down. Like if it stops pinging, then it emails us. We go in and reset the server. And obviously the goal is for it to be decentralized, so we don't have to do any of that. But the other aspect of downtime is when it gets heavy usage is when the RPC service gets banged on, and the RPC entry is really typically the slow thing. Like on Polygon, they had many issues with the RPCs. So what we've done is we've created like a kind of like a mesh layer of the RPCs where you have many RPCs talking to the sequencer, and on our server settings we disable anyone else talking to our sequencer except the first layer of RPCs, and then you have a second layer of RPCs which Anchor is going to be supporting, and they will be talking to our layer of sequencers, which we talk to the sequencers. So you have many buffered, load balanced RPC nodes that will be talking to the sequencer that can relay it. And the last part is once you do get the bottleneck, the RPC is being fully utilized, you get the bottleneck of the system, you could fall back into the fact that it's proof of data availability is offloading a lot of the costs. And so the CPU, it's a CPU bound scale. And so the stronger your CPU is, the better memory system you have, the faster you can sequence. So another reason to use centralized sequencing for now is to push the throughput as fast as we can go, and then set that as the gold standard. So when decentralized sequencing comes, it's got to keep going around that fast. So some of the things we're working on there, not just go to AWS or a cloud, but actually set up a mainframe. We're talking to one university in the States to potentially run a mainframe as a sequencer. And it's a fairly recent mainframe as well, so we should be able to, if we're going to go as fast as we can, you can have one really, really strong sequencing computer with a big CPU pushing the proof of data availability to its limits. So that would get us to Visa MasterCard level scale without the Syscoin nodes, master nodes, the decentralization breaking down, because they're really just passing around data. It's 64 megabytes of data every 2.5 minutes. It's fully scalable for them, and any nodes syncing up in the future won't have to download all that data because it gets pruned. So they're just downloading hashes. So the whole thing becomes more efficient, more secure, more decentralized, and you have one computer responsible for all the throughput. And if that's a mainframe, then you could push it as fast as it could possibly go before the EVM, for an EVM itself.
Yeah, and since you brought up, the fact that there is a degree currently of centralization, and that, of course, that applies to all roll-up solutions, whether ZK or optimistic out there, that's not necessarily a bad thing at this stage in the game, because this is relatively new technology as far as seeing what it does and how it works under the burden of market adoption. So it's not entirely a bad thing. Of course, the goal is to decentralize, but for now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a degree of centralization. However, the risks associated with that point to, it really being better for maybe a nonprofit like Syscoin Foundation to run the sequencers. And there has been a little bit of confusion. So, like, as far as people wondering, like, who's going to run Rolex. Rolex is a product owned by Syslabs, right? So it's developed by Syslabs. But as far as the Rolex instance that is built on top of Syscoin and scales Syscoin, that infrastructure or that instance will be managed by Syscoin Foundation. So it's really kind of better to go that direction, to have a nonprofit that's sort of trustworthy or has proven itself over time, has existed for a while at least, right? To be in that position rather than a for-profit with a board whose interests may shift away from the layer that they're providing scalability for.
I think with the downtime question, we would have to, because it's a centralized sequencer, we have to model out, there's a chance, or probably likelihood, but we would also plan for downtime and off hours if we ever have to do upgrades or whatnot. So there's, as we upgrade, as the fraud prover gets created, we will have upgrades where we do have planned downtime, and we'd announce that and do it during off hours, like when the activity is low as possible, and then interrupted downtime where we don't predict is also something that's, it's like there's a probability it happens, but that's why we have those scripts to watch in case if it's not a predicted downtime, then we are alerted in real time, so we're able to start it up again as soon as possible or figure out the issue.
Yeah.
With a centralized one, that's not an issue. It's just in the meantime before that becomes decentralized.
Yeah, and it can be improved from there as well. Like, typically you start out with something that gives you alerts, and shortly thereafter you're able to tweak the process, tweak your contingency where certain scripts or actions are taken automatically based on a certain event rather than you simply getting an alert and having to manually take action. But sometimes establishing those and having those operate reliably requires some time or events, right, that you can tune based on. But our ultimate idea would be to have contingencies and disaster recovery type redundancy in place that would automatically roll over where there wouldn't be any downtime at all, right? So that's what we'll get to. Okay. If anybody has any other questions, I guess we have maybe a couple more minutes. So go ahead. It looks like Jag's dropped off. He's got to handle some other things. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up after another couple of questions. In terms of security, what are the biggest roadblocks that I see? I'm trying to understand what you mean by roadblocks, but we've always put security and decentralization first, as you know, with how we've designed our layer one, so that ultimately the security that's inherited by the ecosystem, is as good as it can possibly be, given all the technology, the different blockchain technologies out there. Right, we've created this synergistic design. As far as possible scenarios, that's why we audit. We have our code audited. Rolex is, I believe, currently under the process of undergoing a final audit, so that we can identify potential scenarios in the code and adjust for those appropriately. Yeah, no problem. Okay, I think that wraps it up. We appreciate everyone joining. Looks like we had a pretty decent crowd for a Discord Fireside. I believe, capture this. I'll have to do a little bit of editing to make it actually worth listening to. So probably some noise and some different things I can clean up, and we'll probably upload this to YouTube. But wherever we put it, we'll provide it to the community. Again, we appreciate you guys a lot and your support. As a project, we are really carrying out our vision, and we're very grateful that we have a community that sees the bigger picture of blockchain, what we're trying to do, and has as many astute members as we do. So it really means a lot to us, and we appreciate you giving us your time. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put out the bonfire for now. So until next time, everyone, all the best.
Thanks, everyone.